What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today on a Friday after a historic Detroit Pistons performance. I am your host, Sean Murphy, and we are live to talk about what was one of the greatest individual Pistons performances we have ever seen. And if you think that's hyperbole, let me just read you this real quick. Cade Cunningham is the only Piston ever to have 40 points, 10 assists, and 5 threes made in a game. Not only that, after Cade Cunningham's dominant performance in Madison Square Garden, he is one of only 3 players to ever visit the Garden and get 40 plus points and 10 plus assists in a game. Those other 2 players, LeBron James, he did it twice, so, we'll flex there. And Allen Iverson. Cade Cunningham is cementing himself amongst the best of the best that this league has to offer. And he's doing it at such a young age with such a young team that no one expected to be where they were. And then we're getting to the point where we have to ask ourselves, why is Cade Cunningham not more firmly at the top of the MVP conversation? Specifically, when you look at performances like these. First of all, this is a performance where Cade went into this, to the Madison Square Garden, to a hostile environment, to a team that they lost to in the postseason last year, that, that they've had their number all year long. The Pistons have. The Knicks, that I'm saying, definitely not the other way around based off of what we've seen. And after those 3 games that the Pistons played against the Knicks this year, the point differential was a total of plus 84 points. The Pistons outscored the Knicks by 84 points this season without Jalen Duren playing a single game. And sure, you can throw in some other guys who played really well, which we're definitely going to be talking about Paul Reed again in a minute. But when you look at the performance that Cade Cunningham had, I mean, it starts and stops right there. I mean, again, 42 points, 13 assists, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks, 1 steal. It's the fact that Cade's doing all of this on both sides of the court. Sure, guys like Jokic and Shea and Luka are these amazing offensive players. None of them are doing it to the level that Cade is on both sides of the court. And that was one of the most dominant 2-way performances that we have seen from a Piston ever, legitimately, against a Knicks team that has legitimate aspirations of winning a championship, or at least they did going into last night. Based off of the look of Fat Joe and Tracy Morgan and Spike Lee at courtside, I don't think those aspirations are living so fruitfully anymore. And so when you start looking at the MVP case for Cade, here's another pretty crazy stat, just to kind of put in perspective how good of a season Cade's having. Players in the history of the NBA to average 25, 5, and 9 in a season. Jokic, Luka, LeBron, Harden, Oscar Robertson, Westbrook, Cade. Here's the kicker with that list, though. Cade is the only one to do it, as of right now, at a winning percentage of 70% or greater. That's insane. Sure, we can look at other players who are technically having better statistical seasons. There might be guys who are scoring at a higher efficiency clip than Cade is right now. There might be guys who technically have more points than Cade does right now. There's definitely not a guy that has more assists than Cade does right now. I know that for a fact. But when you pull in everything with the fact that you're also considering wins, and if you're talking about the most valuable player to their team, what they bring to the table, Cade Cunningham is about as clear of an example of that as we have seen. He is certainly the best American born player since James Harden when he last won MVP. And this came on the day, by the way, where that GQ article from Cade came out, or that GQ article with Cade came out, where he was interviewed about, where he thinks he stands. He called himself the best American born player in the world. I think that proved out. He called out foul baiting. Well, guess what? He only had 3 free throw attempts in that entire game. He was torching them up in all sorts of ways. He made 5 threes, which Cade's not known for his perimeter game. So the fact that he was torching them up like that, it was quite insane. And remember, this isn't a Knicks team that has scrubs when you look at defensive personnel. He was doing this predominantly against OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and newly acquired Nick Jeremy Sohan, who he had that what will now be infamous for the Knicks step back 3, where Cade instantly looks at Sohan, hits him with the and says things that I probably can't repeat in a podcast microphone and stay monetized. But nonetheless, did all that again with no Isaiah Stewart, no Jalen Duren, and did it on Amazon Prime right out of the break. I'm going to be honest with you. I penciled in this one as a loss. I thought with how dominant the last 2 games were, I thought the Knicks were going to catch at least one from the Pistons before the playoffs came. I thought after the All-Star break, there was a chance that the Pistons could look sluggish. And listen, it wasn't looking great right out the gate. But then Cade just put the pedal on the metal. He applied the pressure. And I think the biggest difference that you see with Cade now versus Cade when he came into the league is Cade has such an innate ability to get to his spots at such a unprecedented clip while having the conditioning to do it every single night whenever it's required of him. It's the consistency. It's the fact that it's being taken for granted now to where it just flies under the radar until all of a sudden after the All-Star break, people are like, wait a second, the Pistons have a better record now than the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have less losses than the Thunder. What's happening? And so when you throw in all of those things, I just don't understand the argument for anyone else other than Cade Cunningham for MVP right now. Yeah, Jokic is doing a lot of great things statistically. He's also missed 16 games in Denver's 4th. Yeah, Shea's doing a lot of incredible things from a scoring perspective. Highly efficient. They've fallen off a cliff since December, and Detroit's only going up as the season's gone on. And so, yeah, I might be a little biased because I get to see it up close, pretty often. But the fact still remains, that was one of the greatest individual performances I've ever seen. Whether it be in a Pistons uniform, whether it be whatever uniform, that was the epitome of a statement game, of an arrival game, of someone cementing themselves in concrete as a superstar. That's what we saw happen with Cade Cunningham in the Garden last night. I think the other thing that you look at, when you kind of go past the Cade individual performance, is you go right back to the fact that all roads lead back to the Pistons whooping the Knicks this season. It has been as thoroughly dominant as we have seen a season series. The Pistons have had the Knicks number and then some this season. I think the question is, first of all, does this matter when you talk about the postseason? Not really, from the standpoint that the record goes back to 0-0 and all that matters is the team that's going to be able to pull out 4 wins in a 7-game series. But if there's anything that we've seen, the Pistons clearly are going to enter the postseason with a mental advantage. They're not going to be scared of the Knicks by any means. And they have a pretty clear understanding of what it takes to beat them. And I think they've identified some, especially this Knicks team this year in particular, have some real holes. And I think one of the things that was really glaring was the fact that I think this Knicks team, as much as they talk about being about toughness and about wearing the Timberlands and the hard hat, I think this is a team that welts to physicality, that doesn't like playing against that type of pressure. And they can bring it in spurts. They might be able to bring it more consistently over the postseason as the adrenaline raises, as the stakes get higher. But I think the reason why the Pistons have had an edge and why I think they would have an edge when you get to the postseason is that this is how the Pistons play every game all night long. They are the ones that punch you in the mouth and are ready to take the punch back because they know that they're going to be able to be the ones that are going to be the last ones standing, that can keep throwing the punches, that can withstand the array. If games get messy, it goes in their favor. And when you talk about postseason basketball, like playoff structure, those are the things that generally thrive. I mean, teams like the Knicks, generally a great three-point shooting team. They were 8 of 35 in this game. Pistons, not normally a great three-point shooting team, but they don't have to rely on that as heavily. They can bring their defensive effort, and that's something that travels. That's not a live and die by the three scenario where it's like, okay, well, we're going to take all these great shots, and even if we're getting phenomenal looks, they just might not fall. It happens. Whereas with the Pistons, it's like their defensive pressure that can thrive in the mud, that can thrive in the rain, in the sun, wherever you need it to. And on one hand, you can look at last year again, if Knicks fans, the thing that they're going to tell you today as far as why they're not concerned or why they're telling themselves that they're not concerned is because last year the Knicks did lose the season series to the Celtics. They did get blown out in a few of those games by the Celtics. And then they also lost the season series to the Pistons. But then they came in the postseason. Things are different. I would tell you two things are drastically different about this season than last season. Number one, Mike Brown's the head coach of the New York Knicks and not Tom Thibodeau. I think that matters because you look at the mental makeup and you look at the way that this team, has played this season. It has not been as cohesive as it was last year. Sure, offensively, the Knicks might have a better system with more movement. They might like that system better, but when you look at the defensive side of the ball, they're definitely struggling there. I think one thing you've definitely seen this year, and I think you really saw last night, is the Knicks struggling to keep Karl Anthony Towns engaged on both sides of the court, especially, like one thing the Pistons do, or a lot of teams do when they start a game, is one of, if not the first play they're going to run on offense is going to be a play to their big. The Pistons actually did this with Ben Wallace all the time in the going to work era. And the reason why you do that is because when you can get your guy an easy bucket, it keeps them mentally engaged on the defensive side. When you're asking them to do a lot of the hard work and doing a lot of the unglamorous stuff, throwing them a couple easy baskets is going to keep them more engaged on the defensive side. And what I think you saw is Karl Anthony Towns was almost a non-factor when you're just talking about the offensive side of the ball in that first half. He only had 2 points on 3 shots in that first half. And he was I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. He was bad on both sides of the court, flat out, just totally, utterly outplayed by Paul Reed. And to the general basketball public, I mean, we know in the Pistons community how good Paul Reed is. We've seen it all season long. We saw it last season. Paul Reed's been great. In fact, when Paul Reed starts this year, this is per StatMuse, the Pistons are 7-1 when Paul Reed starts this season. That's a real statistic. He started 8 times. They've won 7 of them. And don't tell me every time he started, you haven't thought, oh, well, that's a loss. Because the general NBA population probably would think that. again, I'm going to be getting to Paul Reed here in a minute. That's just a crazy statistic, but nonetheless, Cat was getting outplayed by Paul Reed. And the reason why is because Paul Reed was bringing the physicality. Paul Reed, call a spade a spade. I think the conditioning's in a bit of a better position. And I think the Pistons just have better overall cohesion in their roster in terms of how they want to play. I think the Knicks have a lot of conflicting principles there. And so, again, I think when the postseason comes around, the Knicks are definitely going to be ready to play. They do have the experience. Jalen Brunson, obviously, he actually had a really good game. He's only going to be contained so much. So I think that's obviously something where it's like, Jalen Brunson's going to go out and get his. But OG Anunoby's definitely not the defensive player that he once was. Even though he had 4 blocks in this game, Cade just about had his way with him, for almost the entirety of this game. Mikal Bridges is definitely not living up to the 4 or 5 or 6 first-round picks, whatever the crazy amount of capital was that they sent to the Brooklyn Nets for him. He's clearly not living up to that. And so, if you're just talking about momentum, if you're just talking about what we've seen throughout the regular season, the Pistons are checking all the boxes. And flat out, I think if you're the Knicks, your best chance of getting to the finals is hoping that somehow the Pistons face the Celtics or the Cavs or one of these other threats in the Eastern Conference to get knocked off before they face the Knicks. But assuming these teams face off in a 7-game series, with how historically dominant the Pistons have been against them this year, mind you, this is the worst the Knicks have lost in a season series to a team since the late 70s. We're talking like 50 years it's been since they've gotten the kicked out of them this badly by a team. If they face in the postseason, yeah, I think the Knicks are concerned. And to all the people that are saying, oh, well, Knicks were the ones that pulled it out in the postseason last year. It hit that 6 shot last year. We got that going for us. Jalen Brunson said it himself after the game. It's a whole new year. That narrative that the Pistons are just going to, it's just going to be the same series as last year is just demonstrably false. There's a lot of things that have changed in between that time. One of them we touched on at the top of the show. Cade's an MVP candidate. If not, should be the MVP candidate. He was great last year. He's a different cat this year. This Pistons team is playing with a different level of confidence. And oh yeah, they haven't even seen Jalen Duren yet. They haven't even seen him yet. They've only seen Isaiah Stewart for 1 or 2 games. Wait until he's healthy for a playoff series. And then on top of that, even if he does go out, you got Paul Reed playing at an absolutely different level, which, damn it, it's time to talk about Paul Reed. He was awesome. And then you also had Tolu Smith, who I thought played really well in this game as well. He definitely had some moments, like it wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong. The fouls were definitely up there. But, when you talk about the poise that he had, Dwayne Wade at one point on Tolu Smith, he said, wait, that's the Pistons' 4th big? Like, we talk about this depth all the time. That's what it is right there. The ability to have 2 of your 4 or 5 most important players just flat out. And to be able to someone go, we got Paul Reed. We're good. He'll step in. No problem. I mean, personally, it's as much center depth as I can remember in the history of the league, at least in a very long time. I mean, I know the Pistons, back when they won, the championship in 2004, they had Ben Wallace, they had Rashid, who you could slide from the 4 to the 5. They had Earl Campbell, they had Met Okor. I know that was definitely a team that was pretty deep when you talk about the center position. But if you're talking the modern game, and if you're talking to like this current era, this is definitely as deep of a center room as we've seen in quite a while. And Stan Van Gundy, he said it during the game. He said, look, this is a credit to Trajan Langdon, his ability to evaluate talent and to find it in the margins. And I think that's absolutely accurate because, I mean, people remember Paul Reed was a waiver wire pickup over free agency last year. He was playing, he was riding the bench in Philly as the 3rd big or second big there behind Joel Embiid, didn't really get a whole lot of shine. And now is slotted into this Pistons team and has been, just the perfect, like complementary piece to slide into this rotation. And so, again, I think we've had so many moments now where we've gone, that's the Paul Reed game. No, that's the Paul Reed game. No, that's the Paul Reed game. This is the year of Paul Reed, honestly, is I think kind of what we're really figuring out. But I mean, honestly, it's really just it's the year of the role players, it's the year of depth. And I think there's something to be said about star players win you games, but role players win you championships. And the reason why the Pistons have as much of a chance as they've had in 20 years to win a title, yes, it's because you have a guy like Cade who's been as solid as as anyone in the league. It, very well could be the first ever Detroit Piston to win most valuable player and should be the first Detroit Piston to win most valuable player. But it's also because of the complete depth that you have. It's because of the Javonte Greens. It's because of, it's because of the Danis Jenkins. It's because of the Paul Reeds, the Isaiah Stewarts, the Jalen Durans, the Tobias Harrises. Tobias didn't have a good shooting game at all last night, but he, again, the reason why JB calls him the security blanket, he hits shots in important moments, but then on top of that, he finds other ways to complement and play well and bring physicality. He's been really good on the defensive end. He just, for a guy who's in his 15th year, he's been a phenomenal addition to this team. And, again, we talk about that a lot, but it's not like Trajan went out and, like moved a farm of picks or made these moves that analysts were clamoring about when they were made. Like the Pistons didn't win anyone's off season over the last couple of years, but you know what they did do? They got guys who were dependable and can play, and you know exactly what you're going to get out of them. The Duncan Robinsons of the world, and so again, I think it's just when you're able to on national TV, see people go, who the hell is this guy that's beating us? Like that's a pride point of culture, of talent evaluation, and it's a good sign of what you have brewing is a pretty darn good thing. So I thought, again, a lot of things to look at from that Knicks game last night and say, man, this Piston season can truly be different. But also, I think we're really about to see the Cade Cunningham MVP conversation heat up quite significantly here. And especially, like that conversation could heat up even more if we talk about, obviously they play the Bulls on Saturday, which, we'll talk about a certain player on the Bulls here in a minute. But, like if you talk about this schedule that they have coming up here, the end of the month of February, tell me that Cade doesn't have a chance to cement himself as the front runner from MVP. Okay. Monday, they play the Spurs at home. Wednesday, they host the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder. And then Friday, they host the Cleveland Cavaliers. If they go 2-1, let alone 3-0 in that stretch, the MVP conversation's a radically different conversation than what we were having, going into this week. And again, it really sounded like going into All-Star break, it was essentially a 2-horse race between Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, whatever order that you wanted to put that in. And then maybe the guy that was entering the conversation was Victor Wembanyama. Nuh-uh. Cade has entered the chat and has made his presence known. And especially if they go out and win some of these games against these prominent contenders, against these, incredible young players, especially if they go out and beat Wemby or SGA or, in the Thunder. I know SGA is not playing right now or hasn't been playing. So that's the only thing about playing the Thunder is whether or not he's in the lineup. Nonetheless, that's still a pretty big matchup. So if the Pistons are able to, come out and continue this level of dominance against these top level teams, I think the MVP the MVP momentum just really only intensifies and ramps up. Speaking of, the Bulls I mentioned a minute ago, alluded to a player, you probably know exactly who I'm about to talk about. I'm worried about Jaden Ivey. And It comes from the fact that last night in their first game back from All-Star break, Jaden Ivey, for the first time in his career, collected a DMP. And it's not entirely surprising from the standpoint that you look at the Bulls and they brought in an inordinate amount of guards. Specifically, they have like 5 guards that they're trying to play right now. Like they have Josh Giddey who's back. They have Trey Jones. They have Colin Sexton. They have Rob Dillingham. They have, and Anthony Simons. They have a surplus of guards. But you would think with, kind of the timeline and the age that Ivey's at with the restricted free agency, that he's someone that would probably be prioritized in the rotation. Well, that hasn't been the case. And Ivey was asked about it after the game. And there's a quote that people have been, kind of debating or misconstruing. And so I want to read the quote in its entirety to make sure that we're not missing any context here. Quote, "I've been dealing with knee soreness in my knee. I'm sure people can call it out. I'm not the same player I used to be. That's why. I'm not the JI I used to be. The old JI is dead. I'm alive in Christ no matter what the basketball setting is. No matter how many DMPs, how many points I score, those things are a temporary thing. Jesus is eternal." Now, obviously, I think a lot of people saw, well, he's just talking about the old JI is dead. Like he's talking about being like reborn in Christ. Yes, but really, he said, I am not the same player I used to be. That player is gone. That is Jaden Ivey himself saying he doesn't think that guy is ever coming back. And the fact that someone who was a former number 5 overall pick, who we've seen firsthand in the city of Detroit as recent as last year, just how electrifying he can be, how truly electric of an athlete he was, the burst that he could bring on a court. I legitimately, like when Ivey was at his quickest, there was such a small list of players that could exceed or let alone match that level of speed. And for him to say, I think that's gone, and to say the quiet part out loud, that just sucks. There's no other way around it. That sucks to hear, because you could just see throughout the interview that he's just struggling. And yes, like he's saying the right things, and I think he has as good of a mindset about it as he can. And I think there's something to be said about being able to lean on your faith and all of those things. Like, I don't want to have a conversation about those components, because obviously that's just intrinsically who Jaden Ivey is, and that's always been what he's going to lean on. But what's clear is, as a basketball player, Jaden Ivey's in a real identity crisis here. And I think this Bulls situation, while on one hand could present itself as a fresh start, as a ability for him to address and confront some of these issues that he's having both physically and mentally, it's also just the fact that he went to an organization that's as unstable as it is, that has as many guards as it does, that's clearly as competitive as it is now. He said other things as well about he doesn't trust the NBA landscape, and he, with all of his optimism, I was reading a great article from the reporter who covers the Bulls for The Athletic. I apologize for not having that pulled up right on the spot, but essentially, talking about how, like contrasting Jaden Ivey's, optimism and, kind of like his faith. It's Joel Lorenzi, like contrasting that with just this, kind of this, this clear and, upfront cynicism that's now there with the NBA. And so I think you're seeing someone who's clearly struggling with the business side and the relocation and the harsh realities that come with being in the league, because this is a really brutal business. But at the same time, you're seeing someone who's coming to grasps with not being the basketball player that he once was, and clearly is doing everything he can to to tie his identity to Christ, because for such a long time that was his identity. And athletes talk all the time about how being that guy is so much of their identity. And so Billy Donovan, he was asked about it, returning to practice, because Wes Unseld Jr. was the acting coach. Billy Donovan actually lost his dad, which is why he was not at the game. And he said, in my opinion, he has not moved and played as he did in the past. And so I support I support Coach in his decision. And Wes Unseld, he talked about how this was sheerly a basketball decision, and just citing the log jam of the rotation. And so clearly they're coming out and saying, look, it's the basketball is the reason. But another thing that like to point out here is they're also having Jaden Ivey see a specialist, and he is listed as questionable for that game tomorrow against the Pistons. And I think there's a very realistic chance that we could be seeing Jaden Ivey perhaps be shut down for the season. If not, we could see Jaden Ivey potentially go under the knife again, which is always a scary thing, especially when you talk about someone who, has already had the surgeries that he's had. But there's something to be said about hoping that he can get in front of the right specialist, in the right operating room, and to get the right procedure, and hope that he can regain some of that burst and some of that movement, and not feel some of that discomfort in his knee. But the reality of it is, Jaden Ivey said himself, he doesn't think it's coming back. And I think you're seeing, unfortunately, why the Pistons moved on, but also I think you're seeing, just unfortunately, the cautionary tale of what can happen with some of the guys that come into the draft. Because even the guys like Jaden Ivey, who I thought was as sure thing of a sure thing when you're talking about the archetype, the athleticism, all of those different things, you just don't know. And sometimes so many things outside of people's control can happen that can just radically change the trajectory of someone's career. And it sucks, because while the Pistons are initially were built around the idea of Cade and Ivey being that backcourt together, and being the foundation of the Pistons being those two running their offense. And on one side you have Cade, who's experiencing the highest highs of his career, who is cementing himself as a top 3, if not maybe even the best player in the world. And then you have Jaden Ivey over here on a brand new team going into the summer of restricted free agency. And on the personal side, things might be good. He has a family, he has his faith, he has all those things. But as a basketball player, he couldn't be in more of an identity crisis. And so obviously I have no ill will towards Jaden Ivey. I want to see that situation turn around in Chicago or wherever he ends up next as badly as anyone. But seeing that that he's already out of the rotation, and sure, in theory, they could, try and rotate guys out and give guys different looks. And, maybe they are wanting to see if Jaden Ivey can get this health situation addressed, but it's unfortunately not a great sign that he's getting his first DNP of his career, not even 2 weeks into his new home. So unfortunately, definitely going to have to keep monitoring that situation, hoping for positive updates. And, we'll see where Jaden Ivey's situation is going forward. But that's going to do it for today's episode, folks. What did you think of Cade's performance in the Garden? Do you think he's the clear-cut MVP? Let me know in the comments down below. That's going to do it for today. Be sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Peace out.